The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As always, there are some people stuck in internet traffic, and we're just going to wait for them to dial in. So we're just going to give it another minute or so, and then we'll kick off for the presentation. So if you can just bear with us while we wait for those guys that are struggling to get on to join. Thanks very much. Right, cut take two. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this, our first webinar of 2018, and also our first webinar in the new series entitled HR in the Cloud. So this session will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be made available to you afterwards. Please note that you'll all be on mute throughout the session, but you can ask questions at any time using the question tab on your GoToWebinar navigation pane. For this session, we're also going to be asking various questions that will pop up on your screen, and then we'll share those results live, so please do participate. It's also a good way for us to learn from each other. Okay, so today Kathryn's going to take us through an overview of what cloud systems are out there in the market, looking at the players that are in the space and the type of systems they offer. She'll also be unpacking the impact that these cloud-based systems will have on our current IT and systems infrastructure, and also provide us with a high-level overview of expected functionality within these systems. And then to sum up, she's going to touch on the trends that we'll be facing within the technology space of HR for this year and probably for the next few years to come. So over to you, Kathryn.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning to everyone. I'm sitting in Johannesburg at the moment, but I've told that all my colleagues in Cape Town have been very excited because it's been raining. So yay, hopefully we're turning the corner there. As Nick mentioned, we're going to very much focus on the cloud-based technology. If you've monitored the space, you've noticed that it's very topical today. I've attended quite a few conferences last year, all focused on HR technology, breakfast sessions, attended my own online webinars. And there still seems to be this sort of uncertainty around cloud computing. Should we go? Shouldn't we go? What exactly is entailed? So that's why I thought let's kick off the year. Let's talk about exactly what cloud computing is, what we can expect in this arena, how long we have before we need to move on, and what are the trends that are facing us over the next year or so. And if you really actually think about it, when it comes to cloud computing, we actually all make use of cloud technology. So it's not new to us, it's not new to the market in the slightest. I mean, we all use WhatsApp, we use Dropbox, we use social media sites. A lot of us put a lot of personal information that we're already hosting on Facebook and LinkedIn. But obviously we use it in the more personal framework. So I think to help me guide the rest of the session, it would help me to understand where everyone is in business in terms of cloud computing. So I'm going to put a question up now, and if you could spend a few minutes and just answer it for me. Bear with me, I'm going to find it. So I just want to understand from you, if you can give me an indication and choose one of those in terms of, are you sitting with all your systems in the cloud and you're comfortable? Are some of your components are in the cloud, some are not? Are none cloud-based, but you're busy investigating some options? And the fourth one is we're not really talking about moving to the cloud at the moment, but we'll look at we'll look at it sort of in the next 3 years. So if you can just click on that and vote which one suits you. The results are quite interesting. Very, very, very good to see. Okay, so I'm going to close that off so that we can just move on. And I'm actually going to see if I can share some of these results with you and that you can actually see. So what you would have noticed, if you can see it, is that 50% of us have got some of our systems that are in the cloud. So probably you would find we've got recruitment or we've got payroll that's in the cloud. Some of us have realized we need to move into the cloud and we're busy investigating options. It's really promising for me to see that there's no one that's sort of talking about moving to the cloud in the next 2 years. And as we go through the session, you will actually find out why that is so important not to be in that particular space. So thank you for that. And I think what I'm going to do is just start at the basic, especially since half of us are now busy investigating cloud-based systems. So let's see what exactly is a cloud-based system. So let's start right in the beginning. So what we probably know is cloud-based systems is managing human resources in the cloud. Another way of looking at it very simplistically is it's using online software rather than doing it on Excel or paper-based or a more computer-based system, which is physically located on your hard drive or on the server. And the reason for this move in cloud is because of its strategic importance, because it's reliable. And it allows and empowers the companies to improve not only their processes, but align the workforce initiatives with the business initiatives. Very much this talent management approach. And I think you'll all agree with me that there's definitely been a great shift to this cloud-based HR management system. So we know that there is HR transformation, and this means literally taking advantage of the latest technology, as 50% of us know we need to do, 50% have already done, across all functions of HR and in all parts of the business. So from a technology perspective, in the past, this is what's happened. We have had our computer that's there. We have bought, they call it a perpetual license. It usually sits on a disk. We then put it onto our computer. Sometimes we had to get special hardware to cope with that. And then that exact same software would be hosted on servers which are downstairs with the IT department, or potentially they could be slightly offsite. But everything was governed by the company and policies, and IT drove it. What is now happening in terms of cloud-based HR and what's happened, where we can actually throw the old HR transformation out and what it's meaning now, is that these solutions are almost fully supported by external providers. And because everything is now hosted in the cloud, you do not need to have all the latest and the greatest laptops and computers and technology that is there. You just purely need access to the internet. So a lot of personal devices can now be accessing this information. And as we've seen, some organizations have moved part of the way, and they sort of use a hybrid system. So some HR processes are done in the cloud, some are outsourced, some are still on Excel, some we bought a system for. But what we are finding is that these mishmashes are rapidly being replaced by fully cloud-based solution. Whether it's one provider or it's a few providers that can integrate, there's definitely this move to now actually move towards a more unified approach, and everything is in the cloud. And business directors are realizing that there's quite a lot of benefits to that. You know, one of them is clearly the savings in IT support. As mentioned, you don't need the hardware. Lower prices. You find that many of the online cloud-based systems, they talk about subscription, they talk about SaaS, software as a service. So cloud-based solutions are sort of almost rented and not bought outright. And those license fees can be a lot lower, and the maintenance cost can be a lot lower than buying software outright. You also have the value for HR. So because these cloud-based softwares are more intuitive, they're keeping up to date with technologies, they're automating a lot of our processes, it alleviates us to be a lot more strategic. So we can focus less on the day-to-day administration and more on what we actually need to do with the results that we receive. Then there's also greater productivity. So with these cloud-based solutions, the employees are getting more engaged, they're getting more in touch with what's happening. So there's definitely a greater level of optimization and engagement. These systems will allow us to keep in touch with the latest technology trends. I mean, how many of us have got systems that at the time was phenomenal, but they're now outdated? So we either find ourselves in a position where we have to replace them or we have to update them. And that itself can be quite a costly exercise. So going cloud, these technologies are constantly being updated. In many cases, those costs are absorbed in the annual subscription fee. So we get the benefits of having the best technology, but not having to pay all those fees or have a big project to manage it. And then lastly, it's support. You know, when you have these cloud-based systems, generally it's the provider that troubleshoots. I can't log in. We don't have to now log a ticket to IT or go to IT and say, oh, we need some help. The provider handles that. I mean, that's what the infrastructure is there for. So the day-to-day IT is also pushing now a lot more for cloud-based solutions, specifically now that they know it's reliable. Security is not a challenge anymore. You probably find that these systems are a lot more secure because this is their livelihood. So if they do not provide a secure system, they go out of business. So they spend a lot of revenue, a lot of development in making sure that it is 100% secure. So it's probably more secure sitting with an external provider than it would be in your internal infrastructure. And for 50 of those percent of you, and even for the other half that have decided you need to go into cloud, you have most likely done your research on Google and probably found that there are quite a lot of providers out there. And they're all kind of similar to a certain extent. So I want to just touch base on you and touch base with you and just let you know what's sort of out there. So what we found is your large ERP solutions that were traditionally, you purchase them upfront. They saw the trend to move to cloud a few years ago. So they've purchased various systems. So you've got the large SAP provider that purchased SuccessFactors. You've got Oracle that purchased Taleo. IBM a few years ago purchased Connexa, so that they can now offer their client-based, cloud-based solutions. Then you also have global providers that started off as cloud-based, and that includes Workday. It also includes, I think, Sage, which is from the UK, and in fact, I believe a few years ago they've bought over the VIP product range, and they're trying to upgrade that product range to be cloud-based. Then you have the more local, so they were global providers, but they had a local footprint and offices here, which was HR Smart, and they then in turn got taken over by a company called Deltek. You have Cornerstone On Demand. You have Sabre. I don't believe Sabre has an office here, but they've got a strong presence. And then you get to the more local sort of homegrown, which is S-Cubed and Aspiration and CRS and Paymaster, and Bamboo HR is global, but it's making a place. And eventually, there is just so much choice. You almost don't know where to start. And one thing that I've realized, if you speak to multiple, is that all of them would tell you that we have the best product. And you've got to use us, and we're slightly different. And, you know, I'm in this market. If I have to be very honest with you, they're actually all very similar. One has an extra feature in, one doesn't. And it's really difficult sometimes when you've got a list of 5, which one to decide. And we sometimes just look at the obvious, which is price. So I want to just spend a little bit of time with you to give you things to consider, especially those that are really wanting to move ahead and you're investigating. There's 3 key things that you need to consider. So one thing's important is there's definitely not one size fits all. What works for your competitor is not necessarily going to work for you. So the right system for your business will depend on the type of organization that you are. So look for those software providers that have worked in your industry, that understand your industry and your particular pain points. Also look at the mix of employees that you have. Look at the generation levels. Look at, are they full-time? Are they part-time? Do they work from home? Do they work from an office? Is it a corporate environment? And most importantly, the motivation for you wanting to go cloud-based, for you either seeking a new system or updating a new system. Think about, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? What do you need from this system to help you get there in 5 years' time? And almost determine a set of criteria to help narrow down those options and have a list that says my must-haves and the nice-to-haves. So to help you even further, what I'm going to do is just share sort of 7 tips that I've found when determining a new HR system, so that going forward you can select the best option for yourself. And the first one that we need to look at, which is the obvious one, we're most definitely looking at functionality. Too often people overlook the core functionality of a system, and they're attracted by the new and the exciting. Oh, this one has got chat box. Oh, that's definitely going to work for us. Or, oh, this one's got a nice funky look feel to it. Now, that's definitely going to work. And what you really need actually is an industry-specific system that has the right features and tools to really meet your business requirements. Think about the data you have. Think about the functionality you need. So, for example, you may need core HR functions, you may need a training calendar, and you may need to be able to automate performance. That's the key. Make sure the system meets those requirements. The fact that it has got awesome video support, awesome e-learning content, yes, that's great. But if that's all that system focuses on, and it's sort of more average in the other areas, is it truly going to have an impact on what you need for the business? The second thing to consider is the scope. So I find some cloud-based systems offer an all-in-one solution where you buy all modules in one go. For example, I know one of the systems out there, Workday, does that. Then you get other systems which offer you a modular approach, like I know the Deltek talent system out there manages that. So if talent and performance, for example, are your main areas of focus with needing to get your compensation right, then you can possibly choose to only start with those key modules. And then over time, have a project plan and you build to then add the features of the other systems. So that works out quite well, because obviously implementing a system takes a lot of resources and it eases off on the budget as well. But obviously, if you have a need for everything, then you purchase a system where you can buy everything. If you only have a need for performance, then choose what meets your requirement. The third one is culture fit. And this actually plays quite a huge role, more so in once you've selected the product. Because remember, when you're choosing a new solution, you're also choosing a vendor. So you therefore need to know that you can work with this vendor, that their beliefs, that their value fits yours, that you actually get along with these people, because you're going to be working side by side for at least the first few months in getting this implemented. And you also need to understand what their service offering is. How much support will they provide you with implementation? Do they offer a more consultative approach? Do they provide you with support that is ongoing? Cloud solutions are updated far more often than these traditional on-premise software. So there are changes that are coming into these softwares very quickly. So it's very important that you work side by side with the vendor, that they understand the changes happening and they can let you know before it's actually in the system. And what goes hand in hand there is obviously, ideally, from a time zone perspective, local representation is always good. It's nice to pick up the phone to someone who is in the same country as you and say, I need help here. There's a new feature here. What's that all about? Or I've forgotten how to do this. Please, can you help me quickly? Without having to log a ticket that could possibly take 8 days to deal with. The obvious one is then going to be price. So it certainly is a driver for exploring these cloud-based options. With a traditional system, you typically pay more for upgrades and new features, as I've mentioned before, whereas your software as a service, your SaaS models, all of those nice features are actually built into the price. And the costs definitely vary from one service provider to another service provider. So it's important, that definitely plays a role. And then you've got to look at the technology itself. So can this technology be integrated with the other systems that you've got in place? So can it be integrated with your payroll? Can it be integrated with your finance, for example? A key thing to take into account here is it configurable or is it customizable? So customizable just means now that you are reliant on the vendor to make certain key changes, which means it could be a bit of a time delay, and obviously a cost factor, whereas configurable means now that HR can manage the changes themselves, which allows you to be more fluid and flexible. Those are two things you need to ask up front to know which is going to be the preferred one for you. And then implementation is very important. What is their approach? Do they do the basic configurations and potentially walk away and we've got to handle everything? Or do they have more of a consultative approach and include change management in their implementation and actually help us to understand how to fit the processes for the company? And do you require a consultative approach? Those are key things you need to ask before you even speak to a vendor. And then the last one, which is probably key, is utilization. So beyond the initial implementation, you will want to ensure that your solution that you choose is used by everyone in the business who needs it or at least can benefit from it. So it needs to be used to its full extent. You don't want to have this wonderful, fantastic system and it just sits there like a white elephant, because then it's money literally being wasted down the drain. And realistically speaking, you actually do need the vendor to help you, hold your hand. Some vendors actually have a whole account management program where they monitor the usage for the first 6 months once the system has live, and they feed that back to HR and they say, look, this department is on schedule, this one's not, we need to intervene, let's have a presentation. And they work really closely with you as a client to make sure that all areas of the business are utilized, because you can't always monitor that. So you need them to give you a heads up. And if you can sort of tick all these boxes and feel comfortable that that vendor is there, then you're styling. Then you can comfortably go to the board and say, this is the solution that I think is right for us. So that's all fine and well if we look at the system and we know we've got to go cloud-based, but we've also got to be realistic and understand that these systems have got an impact on the way we do things and on the infrastructure. And already, in fact, that impact, I think, has been felt. So one of the things is there's been new roles that have come into reality. And the second one is the practices, how we do things has been changed due to technology that's come into our space. So that there's sort of two key roles that I've found has come in. And one of them is people and talent managers. Before we had HR business partners, we had HR managers, and now we're sort of either changing our job title to be people and talent management, or we're having a new role that's created. And ultimately, the thinking behind this role is to bring the entire sub-processes of HR together. So we're no longer siloed. So this talent manager is responsible for recruitment, performance, learning, development, and compensation. And they understand the impact of all those processes, and they're looking at it holistically. With this drive for talent management and cloud-based systems, analytics have played a major role. So now we're finding within the HR space, we needing business analysts. We needing people that can actually statistically analyze this data, go back to the business and give them foresight and say, well, based upon what's happened here and the trends, we're predicting we're going to have a 2% turnover in this department because of A, B, and C. And traditionally, that's not a skill set that we've held in HR. But if we've got all these sophisticated technological systems, which some of them have embedded sort of predictive analytics in it, we need to be analyzing that information. And then from a process perspective, so there are 4 key processes and practices that I think we've really had a change in. There are a lot of others, and we can spend hours talking about them, but I thought, let me take the 4 key ones that we can see without even going in a cloud-based solution have had an impact. And the one is recruiting. So social media, artificial intelligence, all of that is hitting us in the space of recruiting. There's also training. E-learning is coming through. The way we deliver training, creating that environment, it's all hitting us in training. You go cloud, all your data is now stored in the cloud. So we really are now paperless, and that's quite a big transition in itself. And how far can we go paperless, and how easy is it to retrieve that? And then the last one that's really been impacted is performance management, the way that we do performance management, how we need to be objective, and obviously the whole concept of continuous feedback. So I think for the next few minutes, I just want to touch base on sort of what you can expect. So, a lot of you have mentioned you're investigating. Some of you might be investigating only one component. Some of you might be investigating full suites. But I thought, let me break it down into these key modules so that if you are looking for a performance system or you are looking for a training system, that you kind of can create a criteria, tick box to say, well, does it have that? Does it have this? Does it have that? Because this is on average what the minimum these systems should be having. So let's start off with recruitment and acquisition. And the reason why this is becoming so important is because traditionally your receptionist, you used a phone and they were the impression to the business. Nowadays, it's actually your web page. So people are going to make a judgment call on you as a company based upon your website. And a lot of traffic coming to your website is people seeing what jobs you have available. So the worst position to be in is not to have a careers link. So my advice is, even if you don't have a system, at least have a careers button where they can send their CV through to you via an email box, but have that careers button present. It is very important because I promise you your competitors have got it in place. If you do, make sure that obviously it's very interactive. As my good friend Jim Collins said, great vision without great people is completely irrelevant. And great people come from recruitment. So the business can have this great idea of growing its business by 200% by doing these initiatives, but if the right people are not in place, both internal movement and getting external, you're not going anywhere. So focus on getting that application process spot on. But recruitment is more than just the application process. As good old Steve Jobs from Apple said, you need to have a collaborative hiring process for it to really work. And that's what a lot of these new applicant tracking systems out there are allowing us to do. So it's not just providing that functionality where we can apply online, it's actually automating the entire process, including extending offers, including onboarding. And I often find it sad that many systems out there are so sophisticated, but they don't have the onboarding functionality. That's still recruitment's responsibility, but that is the impression that you leave with this new employee in the first 6 months that they join. And if you can get that onboarding right, if you can make sure their documentation is sorted out and they've got all the necessary links that they need, the experts have actually said that you can reduce their time by as much as 60%. So the risk of losing them in the first 6 months is reduced by 60% by just getting that process sorted out. And we know how expensive it is to hire in the first place. So typically, what a full-blown applicant tracking system works like, it's like a funnel. So it would start with you being able to request the vacancy online. The system would then automate that process all the way down to advertising, screening, until eventually you can hire the right person. And each one of those have various steps and stages that you can go to. So I've just documented them here quickly for you to go through. So the first one, you got to initiate the recruitment request. Ideally, the system should be able to hold job descriptions, give you the opportunity to create your own forms, and actually have the ability to have multiple forms. So, information that you're wanting from a full-time employee is very different to an external job seeker, and be able to give you that flexibility. That then needs to go through an approval process. Once it's been approved by the business, it needs to advertise. What's key here is that when we advertise, don't be stuck in one sourcing channel. So we need to have the opportunity to go to multiple job boards. We need to have the opportunity to go to social media sites. You need to have the opportunity to go to an employee referral, to agencies, to your website, to the internet, and to talent pools. It is so important that this advert gets advertised to as many different areas as possible. And a lot of them you don't have to pay for. So just make sure that you're not stuck to one particular job board, as an example. Then we receive the applications. From receiving the applications, we can then actually manage them through the recruitment process. So this is where we could come in and we could, for example, let me just make sure that my thing's clicked here. This is where we can screen, shortlist, interact with the manager. As Steve Jobs says, it's all a collaboration process. Be able to interview, and then finally be able to select that process. And the system needs to support all elements of that. And before we obviously hire, we need to be able to do background checks, like MIE as an example, and assessments like SHL. And obviously the ideal would be able to initiate it from a system. It's one of those must-haves versus need-to-have kind of things. So this might be a nice-to-have. But it really does help, because once you've initiated, the information can stay within that system. And then once those checks and balances are done, this is when you can extend the offer. That offer in itself gets approved internally. The job seeker approves it. And then you go to that final stage, which is hiring and onboarding, which I said before, I believe is actually key to have, just to finalize everything in your recruitment system. And most of these good applicant tracking systems out there do have this functionality that is available for you. So if we move on from recruiting and we look now at training, one of the things we all know is that training online and the massive role that e-learning has been brought about has definitely come into the forefront. That typical saying of the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. Learning is the glue. Learning is what we have to do to get the person up to speed once we've hired them, to get them better at their job so we manage their performance, to grow them in development. It's there in everything we actually do. And what has gone one step further, and we elaborate by looking at Albert Einstein, where he said, I never teach my pupils. I only provide the conditions in which they can learn. And that's what's happened to us now. We need to provide the environment in which they can learn. And that environment is what has changed. They're saying it's not one size fits all. It's not everyone comes into the classroom and you will do as we say. They're now saying, but some people learn visually, so you need to give them a video. Some people learn with text, so you need to give them assignments. And if we look at the process of training, it's not as clear cut as recruitment. It's not as clear cut potentially as performance, because there's a lot of interactions that take place. There's a lot of ad hoc training that can take place. There's, what's core is what we train on. So we know we've got our skills and our competencies and the knowledge, but you've got teachers, our facilitators, instructors talking to the student, which is our employee. And then the employees are talking amongst each other and they're feeding back. And it's just this constant conversation that is happening. And your learning management systems that put in place have to be able to manage all of this communications as well as the training that comes through. So for me to explain what sort of you need in a learning management system, I thought it might be a little bit easier for me to actually break it down and who interacts with the system. So the first person that's going to interact with the system is your training administrator. And they are there predominantly to provide the actual content. So it's a content authoring tool. It's important that they have a facility that when they load the content, whether it's e-learning, it's external, facilitator-led, that they can tie that content to competencies and skills. Because if you think about it, I'm a manager. I've realized that my employee is battling in a particular area, which I'm managing them on, which is presentation skills. I need to search which course can address that skill or competency of presentation skills. So if we just bulk uploading content into a system and not tying it with competent skills, I'm not really going to be able to search and create the initiative to go on certain training courses. So it's very important that we train, we sort of align both of them up. Also, what the training administrator does is the automation. So make sure that should training be requested, that there are certain approvals that take place and that there are certain prerequisites that have to be checked, and put all those rules and checks and balances in place. They can manage students. So certainly there are going to be courses that are compulsory that all students have to do. And ultimately, they can pull reports for the workplace skills plan report. A lot of these what training was done versus what was achieved, the cost of those things, all of that can now start play a role and can be the responsibility of their training administrator. But the key thing there from their side is the content. That content can be put in easily, that it can handle different types of content. It definitely has to be able to handle e-learning content, but be able to upload a YouTube video. We put in a PowerPoint presentation. All of that is key functionality for a training administrator. And then you've got the training manager, or we know as a facilitator. So that's the one that sometimes actually delivers the training. So they also participate in helping out with the automation and possibly part of the approval process. They themselves can run certain courses and enroll students compulsory on those courses. But more importantly, they're responsible for the class schedules and knowing when is training going to happen, so that if I want to enroll, I can schedule my diary accordingly. I must have the ability to bulk enroll. It is so important. I don't want to have to sit there one by one by one by one. It could take me forever. And then ultimately, the training manager or the facilitator is the one that's responsible for putting the tests together, putting the assignments together. Especially when you do e-learning, you need to have those checks in place. They're responsible for grading because, as I said, it's linked to skills and competencies. So once I've completed that course and I've been graded, those skills and competencies should be added to my portfolio because now I have completed that particular training. And for the workplace skills plan report, obviously, attendance register is very important. And your really good LMSs, your learning management systems, will actually allow external providers to interact so that they can do the attendance register online. So that when it comes to reporting, it's accurate, it's real time, and it's relevant. And then, of course, the last role we cannot forget is the actual student or the employee. So they obviously are looking for a whole lot of functionality as well. They would like to be able to search a course because they would like to start talking to their manager and they can see what does our training department offer. Possibly even request that they get enrolled and then an approval process takes place. They also want to see their training record. They want to be able to see, well, what have they achieved, both external and internal. And it's amazing to see how once they've completed training online, they just light up when they say, hey, look, my record, it's getting longer. And they get more involved. They get more excited. Also certifications, even if it's a one-day first aid course, the system should be able to generate a nice certificate that if they wanted to, they could print it and stick it on their wall. We're trying to encourage that training. We're trying to encourage the growth of skills because you can never stop learning. And we really need to get that culture going, and the technology that we put in place needs to help us to get to that level. And that would definitely help us to reach the goals that we have in training. The third process that we spoke about was your actual data storage. And, cloud storage, if you look at the true definition, is a model of data storage in which the digital data is stored in a logical way. And it's hosted, obviously, off-site. That's a whole lot of theory that's just gone into that one statement. But what we do know is that we need to get over this hurdle of not being in the cloud, which, looking at the results from earlier on, we all have got over the hurdle. So we all know we need to go in the cloud. We all know that we need to modernize to strive. We know that that's no longer a question. I think some of us are sitting in to say, well, how do we progress? What comes first? What must first go in the cloud? Who do we choose? Those are more the questions that we're looking for. But it's good to know that we know the impact on HR will be huge in the upcoming years if we don't go this particular route. And what we do know is that all information and processes can actually be stored on the system. So you get your company strategy supplied by the HR strategy, and then to execute that strategy comes recruitment, training, benefits, communication, employee relations, record keeping, health, safety, and security, and all of that there are now cloud-based applications. Some, as I said before, in one solution, some in multiple solutions, but they're all accessible now. And the beauty is once we are in the cloud with all of those solutions, legal compliance becomes a whole lot easier for us to manage and to govern. So data storage no longer has its stigma of, oh, are we reliant on the POPI Act? Are we okay there? That's gone. And we're finding now that there's a big drive. We've got a lot of requests from IT departments, in fact, saying we need to move to the cloud. What do you have available? How does it all work? So there are no more hurdles anymore, which is great. We're finding even government departments are starting now to move to the cloud in a big way in order to get their legal compliance right, to get their turnover, not their turnover, but in terms of get their internal SLAs resolved. And then it comes to that fourth component, which is a hot topic for everyone, which is performance. And we know that performance has been through a tremendous amount of scrutiny over the last few years. And fundamentally, the way we do performance has needed to change. I mean, even the challenge of should we do quarterly reviews has been put in place by some of the larger consulting firms. And many systems in the marketplace, sadly, have not kept up to date with these particular changes. And the biggest one is continuous feedback. You know, as Bill Gates once told us, we all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. If I continuously hit my head against the brick wall and don't get told, you know what, that's probably going to hurt your head, I might continue hitting my head against the brick wall. Employees need that feedback. Managers need that feedback. And definitely that's where the focus has been, is on that employee experience, on that engagement. And performance now needs to be more aligned and actually a lot more positive in its approach. So what we find is that the good systems out there that focus on performance are no longer just a mere electronic appraisal system, but they're more a continuous performance management system. You know, like you can see, there's this continuous process from the diagram that we have here, looking at the systems that need to support it. The key thing is that it's accessible for managers. It's easy, it's quick. You know, sometimes having the simple, basic things in place is more powerful than having all the bells and the whistles. So it's important that because your managers and your employees are now the ones that have to interact with the system, that it's easy to use and that there's a way for them to actually put in this continuous feedback quickly and effectively, because that will then lead to the increase of objectivity and allow the employee also to have a voice in many of those particular cases. And as I said, not just the ability to score online and to give me a good rating, because it's the how I've done performance that's more important than the fact that I've done it. So going through all of this, and I've given you a lot of information, I think it's very clear that we know there's change ahead. We've already had a lot of change, and we've adopted with that change, we've adapted with that change, we've moved. But what is really scary, when I did a lot of research and I read some of Josh Berson's research and Forbes's research, is that the rate of change this year is tremendous. You know, we were talking about social media, and then 3 years later it came into the site. We're talking last year in August, they spoke about chatbots. In December, it was in the system. So it's no longer a case of we talk and we wait for a few years. We talk and literally within weeks, it's now available. So I've just summarized what I feel are the sort of the main trends that I'm finding are coming our way in 2018. And how the global spectrum is actually looking at things. And one of them is that there's now the shift from automation to productivity. You know, for many years, the focus on HR technology was to automate, integrate practices. So this meant that you needed to have online payroll, record keeping, learning, CV capture, interview, hiring, assessment, compensation, performance, etc., all into one. And yes, everything is important. Yes, you need to automate it. It's just business as usual. We need to now sort of look beyond automation. You know, the big topic in business today is productivity. So we're now working on agile, team-centric businesses. And we are overwhelmed actually with too much. With technology, your cell phone is always available. People are WhatsApping you. You actually are getting so much communication that's coming through that there's a shift now to look at avoiding burnout, to focus more on employee engagement and avoid issues. So these systems no longer just need to automate, but they need to help companies be more efficient, so that no longer do we have to burden our staff with a whole lot of workload that they actually cannot cope with. And that is going to be the next challenge. The second one is that there's an acceleration of these systems in the cloud. But interestingly, it's not the center of everything. What I call an HR management system is when you've got your payroll, your employee benefits, your compensation, your performance recruitment all in one. And yes, they're very important, and it still is the rage. And we know that cloud is no longer if, but it's the when and the how. What is critical now is there seems to be a big sort of movement. If you look at the green bar there, it's the employee self-service. It's putting the employer and their experience in the middle. So there's a lot more focus now on not just the data surrounding HR, but the talent management of HR. And you'll see in the market, there'll be a lot of systems that actually just focus on talent management, getting that engagement and that experience right. And that seems to be the next thing, the next meaningful impact is the impact that we will have on the lives of the employees and the managers. I've touched on this already. Continuous performance management, it is here. We need to get with the program. It's not going to change. We need to find a way to actually facilitate it, that the managers are equipped to do the continuous feedback. We're not talking about doing away with ratings. Rather, I think we're talking about building a new ongoing process for goal setting, coaching, evaluation, and feedback. We're also finding a trend now for feedback, engagement, and analytic tools that reign. So I think only a few years ago, the engagement survey market was robust, but it was quite sleepy. And what we found today is it's become quite dynamic. There are a lot of new real-time survey systems out there. The 360s have come to life again. And it's just a way for companies to get real-time information in terms of what are their employees feeling. There is noise going around that the traditional climate survey is no longer valid, that we need to find new ways of doing things. The jury's still out on that one, but what is really important is that we need to have that constant feedback, that constant evaluation with our external job seeker market and our internal employees in terms of what they're feeling, how they're feeling, because we need to be able to adjust to keep those engagement levels going. The fifth one, obviously, we've also touched on is the reinvention of corporate learning. So we've seen it. If you've done your investigations and you were looking for learning tools, you can see there's a new breed. They've arrived. They're being snapped up very quickly. And these include a lot of your new modern learning management systems that possibly have artificial intelligence helping, a little chatbot helping the person. This is how you enroll in a course. This is what's going to happen. And a lot more interactive. E-learning is definitely important. It's expensive in some instances, but a lot of these learning management systems are now providing the capability that although you don't have the e-learning content, you can still drive an e-learning course by putting in your own videos, PowerPoints, tests, and assignments to make it a lot more affordable and attainable for companies that don't have these massive training budgets. Another trend is the recruiting market is thriving with innovation. I think this happens on a daily basis. I think it's one of the biggest sections that we can actually see the change in. And I think companies are now spending billions and billions globally each year on recruiting. It has become an escalation war for employment brand, candidates, candidate experience, strategic sourcing. And then you find some industries which have got high volume. So, for example, hospitality, retail, services, they have gone the chatbot route. And some of them have even hired people without them ever interacting with an individual. This was announced at a conference last year, and there was a bit of a hushed silence because many of us still believe that recruitment is more of a personal approach and that you shouldn't just leave it all up to a computer. Others are saying, but because we hire so many and they're part-time, we actually can't keep up with the workload. We need a PC to do it for us. So once again, it's going to be industry specific as to how far your innovation will go. And then the second last one is the well-being market has exploded. So once again, it ties in with, we need to be in touch with our employees. We need to know if they're near burnout. We need to create an employee well-being. The focus now is sort of shifted from just the health and make sure that they've got a medical aid plan to reducing burnout, make sure we got performance, to even human performance, where we're encouraging our employees to do these run for life, to do these park runs, and just try and help them to get healthier, because obviously a healthier employer means they take less sick leave, but also it means that they're a lot more productive. And we're starting to look at starting from the back upwards. And then lastly, this is not going away. In fact, people analytics has actually matured and it is growing. A lot of us who have got cloud-based systems, we're in a nice position where a lot of them have embedded analytics. But now we find the board is actually expecting us to now understand from a high organization perspective, what is the turnover, the initiatives that you've put in place, how has it worked? You sought someone from that particular job board that cost you 10,000 Rand. How quickly did that person get up and running performance? Was it an investment well worth spent? Once again, that mention of that HR business analyst role. So it is maturing. It's an expectation from the HR department, and it's only going to put more pressure on us going forward. So we definitely need to start building that skill set internally. So in summary, a few points that I can leave with you is we need to modernize, to strive. And looking at the poll earlier, I can tick that. We all know some of us are there, some of us are investigating to there. We're well on our way. We need to consider moving to the cloud. Tick. We've got that already sorted out. And key focus is now on talent management. So it's key focus is now on the employee experience. So the software tools that we look at, we need to see how the employee will interact with it and will it meet that requirement. And then lastly, especially for those that are investigating systems, know what your motivation and drive is and select a system that meets your requirement. And then we can sort of look at all the bells and the whistles that go through. So I think before I hand over to Nick, I just want to see if there's any questions. I just want to quickly mention that this webinar series, this was just the introduction, just to put us in the picture with cloud-based solutions. And over the next sort of a month and a half, sort of 6-8 weeks, we are actually going to unpack the components of these various systems. So if you are in the market for looking for a recruitment system, for example, join us on the 22nd of February, or if you just want to make sure your solution is sound, we will actually go through what is in the market and show you a typical system that follows the full process. Thereafter, we will do performance software, and we will unpack that. We will look at compensation and how we can make that a lot more streamlined with letters and that correspondence that goes with salary increases and bonuses, etc. Then we'll go on to the training side and look at learning management. And then we'll do on the 12th development management. And then we will end on the 19th with looking at the core HR data. And the reason I've put a session aside for core HR data is because sometimes we will purchase a system, but we haven't really understood all the data that we need. We've got a job description, and now we want to go with this performance system, but we haven't really categorized KPIs and KPIs. So for those of us that are investigating, at the same time, we can start building our data so that we know that our data is right. So whatever solution we choose, we don't have to slow down the project by then having to build data that comes through. So from my side, thank you very, very much. If there are any questions, please give a shout, but I'm going to hand over to Nick now.
Well, thanks very much, Kathryn. I hope everyone found that really informative. Guys, we do encourage you to give us feedback on, whether you're finding value in these things or where we can improve. So please feel free to connect with Kathryn on LinkedIn, send her an email, Kathryn@silversoft.co.za, or myself, Nick, N-I-C-K, @silversoft.co.za. Actually, no questions so far today. None have come through the chat section. But if you do have any questions that you'd like us to follow up on, again, please just send us an email or connect on LinkedIn. Looking forward to the next sort of quarter. Kat's got some good stuff lined up, and we hope to see you all in the near future on the 22nd of Feb. Go well, everyone. Cheers. Bye.